Today we have a weird one. You might know already a little bit about nouns, a little bit about grammar, but you might be a bit confused on how those two play together. I'm not going to talk about why you need to learn Romanian grammar, because you should if you want to speak the language, yeah? But instead I'm going to give you mură în gură the steps you need to use correctly a noun in a sentence. Imagine it as a validation guide.
Or a grammatization guide.
Although it might seem like a detective work, what is about to come, you need to know there are only 4 steps. And if you practice them over and over and over again, then you will make sure you use the correct noun. And your conversation partner will know and will not have any confusion about the words you use, the nouns you use. Now, to do that, we will take a sentence and a noun. Then see why knowing the genders, numbers, and cases is important. Shortly after, see why the place in the sentence matters. And finally, put all of those together and make sure you get your noun certified. We will use real-life examples from my experience of when Romanian as a second language speakers confuse the right form of a noun to something else. Before we head into this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and if you like the work I do, or you're just interested in more content than the typical YouTube videos, or you just want to learn about my story, head over to Patreon. So, grammar. Grammar is basically how the language is structured and used. And the Romanian grammar is quite different than the English one. So, what you would need to do is change a bit the way you think about the little pieces of this grammatical puzzle. What that means is that first you need to learn the rules, then to understand the rules, and then to practice those rules until they become a habit. Trust me, I hate rules, but sometimes they are necessary. Anyways, the essential rule that you should get away from this is to learn, understand, and practice with grammar in general, and then with nouns in particular. So the next bit covers the things that you will need to learn. I will do my best to help you understand them, but you will need to practice them consistently. A very big disclaimer here of what this video is not going to cover is how the noun changes depending on the stressed form of the direct or indirect object. I hope you're all excited about the return of the whiteboard, and what I'm gonna do next is take this real life example and show you what you need to learn. So, welcome back to the whiteboard. First thing first, I'm gonna take the sentence. One sentence that it might sound probably familiar to you, or something that you want to say, and it is basically confusing if it's the right form of the noun or not included in that sentence. The sentence in this case will be this. Mergem la spitalul. Something that I have seen before, quite a lot, and something that probably many people are a bit confused to how will I realize if that's the right form. So let's take all the assumptions and all the confusion and put them aside for a second, and let's ignore that this is even a problem. This sentence specifically is even a problem, and let's see how those 4 steps to identify and to validate that you're using the right form would work with this example, right? So first thing first, what you need to do is to identify which is the noun that we are talking about, which is the noun that you're struggling with. Obviously, in this sentence, I didn't leave too much room for error, and the word, the noun would be spitalul. Mergem is a verb, la is a preposition. Then, what you need to do in the second step is to identify the different forms, the different characteristics of this noun. So here what we got is first the dictionary form, which is what you use in Romanian as a starting point for every single noun, which is spital. You start with spital, right? That's in your thought, that's the first thing after you have identified it. You decide what type of word it is, obviously in this case it's a noun, and then you try to get the gender. Now this is neuter. So when you get this minimum amount of information, you are ready to go to the next step. But even before that, what you can do with this information, and it's highly, highly recommendable, is to have a bit in your mind a little map with the different variations, let's say, of this noun. So if you start with spital, and you know that usually nouns have two numbers. They can be singular and they can be plural, right? And also they can get articles. So indefinite, definite, and then you get the two types of cases groups. So long story short, you should end up with something like this. You get the idea of spital, spitale, the form with no article whatsoever. Un spital, două spitale, if you use the indefinite article in nominative accusative. Then unui spital, unor spitale, the indefinite article for genitive dative. Spitalul, spitalele, the definite article in nominative accusative. And then finally spitalul lui, spitalelor, the genitive dative definite article. Once again, if this is overwhelming, don't worry, you don't have to know all of them. For example, in a first few months probably, you will not really get too far into this list. You will only know about this, you'll know probably, definitely not about this, you'll probably know about this, and maybe you will be able to use this as well. And then the genitive dative is something for a bit later. But anyways, you should, depending on how much you have learned at that point, if you have learned, for example, definite articles, maybe you should have an idea of this part, and this part. And that's it. If you have been, or if you went a bit deeper into Romanian, you should have the other two as well. The idea here is to have, as I said, a little map. You should be able, when you hear the word spital, you should be like, oh yeah, so that's the plural in definite article genitive dative. Oh, spitalelor. I'm not saying you should do that now, but if somebody, or you yourself, you ask yourself what's the form in that case, or in that with that article, or in that number, you should be able to have like a little map, a little mind map of this is that form with those characteristics. So this was the second part about characteristics, namely here gender, number, then the type of word, the dictionary form, and the type of article you can get. From there, I would say case as well, but to be fully honest with you, with nouns, the variation with case is literally the variation with the article. So those two are kind of tangled, and we will see later exactly what I mean when we'll take this example and talk about it a bit on a broader scale, not this specific sentence. Cool. Before we go to the next step, and if you got to this point without knowing what we do on Patreon, you may want to listen to the next bit.
The Romanian Academy Patreon channel
is a way for you to get more than just the weekly YouTube content. On Patreon, it does not matter what level you are in Romanian. It does not matter if you even have started learning Romanian. It does not matter whether you live in Romania or abroad, if you have to speak to your mother-in-law or just when you visit Romania. On Patreon, you get a chance to decide and influence directly the content on our live streams through polls and discussions. What live streams, you might wonder? Well, if you don't know that already, in that case, you're really in for a treat. We have monthly streams where we get to answer your questions, where you get a chance to speak to people your level, where you can practice and test your knowledge in reading, listening, or vocabulary. So, let the Romanian Academy become your best friend in learning Romanian. You just have to decide on how passionate you are about your journey and then choose a tier. Patreon.com/Romanian Academy. Or just click the link in the description. Alright, enough with the marketing talk. Let's get back to the video. So, the third step is basically about identifying the question and the place of this word in the sentence. We have mergem la spitalul, yeah? And the verb is mergem, as we said initially. And what we're trying to do here is really find out to what question does the noun answer. I know this might seem like an oblivious thing to think about, but you need to think about those questions. And so far, at this moment in time, and with this specific example, we will not really go further than the verb, asking the verb, really, those questions. So, to begin with, the first step you need to do is identify the verb and start seeing what's the relationship of the noun compared to the verb. Like, what's the deal with this noun, considering the action implied by the verb. So mergem is we go, right? And that's the verb. And you might obviously notice from this example that la, it's a direction, it's to. So we go to the hospital, right? So the question is where, and then you put the verb. Where do we go? To the hospital, right? That's the answer. This is a very basic example, but this is the 101 of asking questions to the verb. Why is this important now? Because if you get this question right, which by the way is going to be quite tricky at times because the questions you ask in Romanian are not exactly the same as you do in English, so you need to learn the words and those questions and the prepositions, which are quite important as well, in Romanian, and ask the questions in Romanian, because in English they might be a bit different, right? So again, those questions in Romanian, like a very clear example here. What I mean is the to in dative. Yeah, in English you would not really have the to for most part, but then in Romanian you do. In English you don't ask to whom, you just ask who or whom, right? But in Romanian you ask cui. We'll get to that later, and if you didn't hear about this so far, just go and check the cases video. We have it up here, or up here, somewhere here. Cool. So now that we got to this point, we are aware of what we're talking about, spitalul. We are aware of the different types, the different shapes of spitalul and the characteristics. And we even found out what's the question that it answers to the verb. The next step is going to be a bit more tricky, I think, and I need you to buckle up I will mention the word declension a few times in the next part, or if I don't mention the word directly, you will see basically declensions, which you have already, but you'll see in a second what I mean. What is a declension is basically this variation of a noun, of the form of the noun. If you start, for example, with spital and you get all the other types of spital based on the dictionary form, well, all those are basically declensions of the noun. But you will see more on this, about this in a second. So it's basically variations on the case, the number. That's it. Sometimes it can be depending on the gender as well. If you have a noun, like a feminine noun that comes from a masculine noun or something like this. But right now we're not going to talk about that. Now, if you go through the next part and you will get a bit confused, let me know if you want a specific video of step number 4, just for step number 4, because I am happy to do that a bit more in detail if needed. So now that we found all those three, we will just need to put them all together. So when you put the information together, you need to start from somewhere. Where do you start? You start basically with putting all those informations all this information at step number 2 together. So you have the gender, which you can get from dexonline.ro, very, very good place, or you can get through practice. This is basically what people do, what kids do in Romania when they are tiny and they just learn those nouns. You know, nobody knows by heart when they are 5 about spitalelor, for example. They might have heard it, but what they do is just practice and practice and practice. They hear it from probably a teacher, a professor. I don't even know exactly the name in kindergartens for those. But they hear it, they know it's right, and then they just practice it. Or they just hear it again and they practice it. It's that third step from earlier in the intro when I said you need to practice over and over and over again after you learn those rules. Because otherwise you just forget and that's it. Cool, so you get the gender from those places and also the number you get is from those places, because as you know already, finding out the gender can sometimes be easy, sometimes also can be a nightmare. And the same with number. Yeah, so I really think that until you get to a point where you can feel confident that you know the correct forms of those nouns, double check it on Dex Online. It's a really good place and it can basically validate you the gender and the number for a noun. Now, the next things you want to do is to see if you need an article or not. Indefinite, definite, genitive, dative, nominative, accusative, or no article whatsoever. And this is going to be a bit more tricky. And finally, the case, where we need to find out based on things like the question, so step number 3, and the role that it has in the sentence, was the case. And for that I'm going to give you a little trick in a second, or once again just watch the cases video. For steps number 1 and number 2, you can just go on Dex Online and validate it. But for 3 and 4, I'm going to give you some cheat sheet kind of situation thingy, where you can just use that and validate the correct article or the correct case. I'm going to show you in a second what I mean, and if needed, once again, let me know. Maybe I can make a video specifically about those cheat sheets. It's just like a schema that I came up with, and I think it's 90% accurate, but it needs some testing. Cool, so the gender we found out is neuter and the number is singular, right? This is here the declension of the noun, spital, from Dex Online, where you can find out that it's neuter, and, well, the number, coming back to the sentence, we want to say we're going to the hospital, not to the hospitals, right? Just for this specific example. So you make sure you use the singular form. And the singular form is spital, without any article. Now, this is the first and second piece of information. Now, to the third one, you will need no article. Why you need no article? Well, we're going to see it in the cheat sheet, and also why the accusative case? Well, again, you'll see it in the cheat sheet in a second. Let's look at how to find the article for a noun. So, to do that, you need to ask yourselves a few questions. So, can the noun be any of the available items? So, is it something that we didn't put a finger on yet, or not? And if the answer is no, then you ask the second question. Does it need an accusative or no preposition? Yeah, so in this situation we looked at the sentence has a la there. That is an accusative preposition, right? So the answer is yes. Then does it need something to describe it? This is not the best English, and I apologize. So does it need something to describe it? Adjective, number, even indefinite article sometimes. No, this is not correct. This is not correct. I'll cut it in a second. So does it need something to describe it? Like, does it have an adjective or a number? And if the answer is no to that, well, there you go. We got the answer, no article. If the answer is yes and something describes it, you need a definite article in nominative or accusative. Then, does it need an accusative or no preposition at all? If the answer is no, then obviously it will be the other one, which is the genitive dative preposition. So, what does it mean if you need the genitive dative preposition? You put the genitive dative article. And there you go. You have 3 situations already. So coming back to this first question again, can the noun be any of the available items? If the answer is yes, and we can just say, I'm looking for one of those, yeah, one of the many options I have, yeah, so the answer is yes, it can be any of the available items, then you'll definitely need an indefinite article. You'll definitely need an indefinite article. So, in that case you have 2 options. Does it need an accusative or no preposition? If the answer is yes, well, I think you guessed it, use a nominative accusative indefinite article. Otherwise, it needs a genitive dative preposition, and you would use a genitive dative article. I will talk more about all the different options with some examples for you at the end, some exercises that you can do until the next week. Cool, so now we found the article of a noun. Now with this framework you can basically identify the article and decide, oh yeah, it's validated, there's no article there. You know, you can put a tick. So if we had tick, 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 you know, so far, but I need to remove them so I can Control Z further. Now, how do you identify and make sure that you know for sure what case it is? So what role does the noun have in the sentence? Is it the one who does the action of the verb? In that case, it's nominative. Does it give context about what, where, when, how, with whom, from where the action happened? Then it's accusative. There can be tons of prepositions like this here, that's why I put etc. Is it the possessor of another item, in that case it's in genitive. This is the receiver or the of the action or of the consequences of the action. Well, that's it. It's in dative then. So how can we validate it in this sentence? What kind of role does it have in this sentence? Mergem la spital. Is it the one who does the action of the verb? Is it the one who walks? No. Is it does it give the context about, like, any kind of information about the place, the time, the people you go with, and so on? Yes, it tells you exactly where you guys are going. So we can tick this one as well. Yeah, so we have tick, 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 and tick. We have 4 ticks, and now you are basically sure of the correct form. So now if you started doubting yourself with this example, right, and you know that you don't need any article, and you think that, oh, maybe is it really mergem la spitalul or not? Well, you have the answer now, right? This is not correct, and it should be mergem la spital. And because I put so many of those, I'll put another one here. That's the correct sentence, and this is the schema you could use, the model you could use to validate your answer. Alright, so talking a little bit about the general aspect, like using this, taking this framework and using it in other situations, I want to go through the 4 steps very quickly. So in the first one, it could be literally any sentence, and you can have absolutely any nouns. You make sure you first know what a noun is, and then you start asking yourself, so what am I looking at before anything? Don't forget that prepositions are kind of taken together with the noun, so they are working. Sometimes you can think about it as an article. So that's why in those here we took preposition as such an important factor, right? Because it determines a lot of the noun. Then you go through the X. If you don't know already for sure what's the plural, what's the gender, what's the form of the noun in different cases, and then you put them there in a list. Again, this is like a mental practice, right? You can do it on paper if you want to begin with, but should ask yourselves those questions. I'm trying to, as I said at the beginning, I'm trying to help you think in the right way to validate those, to make sure that you use the right tools without needing any kind of confirmation from the outside, because I know with Romanian sometimes it's very confusing and you end up wondering if you use the right form, because there are so many possibilities. So you got all the possibilities, which are basically all those, right? Those are all the possibilities. And then you get to the third place, which is finding out the question. The question is, once again, very, I wouldn't say very, but it can be different than the one in English. Most of the times it won't. Like here, yeah, you used it was where. Yeah, it was where do we go? Where do we go? You ask the verb, where, or what, or when, or how, or why, or with whom, or on what, and so on. Yeah. So when you ask a question, careful. A question is not just one of those, I don't know, 7 or 8. How, why, what, when, which. Yeah, it can put a preposition as well. So it can be on what, it can be with whom, it can be with what, by what, at what time, for example. So yeah, bear that in mind when you ask the questions. And finally, and actually before we go to step number 4, if you got to this point, don't forget to like, subscribe if you haven't already, or check the Discord for joining the conversation. And I will give you in a bit another reason to join Discord, which you really should. I think it's going to be really helpful for you. So putting the information together, step number 4, this is where you take, as I said, as a detective, you take all those information, you write it down the paper, you know, like they do with the detectives. They connect those dots with threads, and you make sure that you're going to have the correct answers to all those 4. You'll pick the right form from here, yeah, and then all you gotta do is put the right word in your sentence. And that's it. You got your certificate in mastering Romanian nouns. Now you'll get a few practice examples to work on your new skills. There are 5 sentences for each of the possible article category. So no article, indefinite article in nominative accusative, indefinite article in genitive dative, definite article in nominative accusative, and definite article in genitive dative, plus 1 extra that simply does not make any sense with this noun that I'm about to give. And the noun you need for the next sentences is câine. The sentences are: pisica se luptă împotriva cușca este așezată pe eu am doar aici la adăpost sunt mai mulți câini, mâncarea este a and osul este la The correct answers will come next week here on YouTube, so if you want, you can wait until then, or just feel free to comment your answers down in the description. And now, you must also know that on Discord we will post the right answers on Thursday, so tomorrow, which is another reason to join us there. Now, I know this might have been a little bit heavy, and some of you, or most of you, might even just ask, why on earth do you even need all of this, or if this is needed after all? I want to get back to what I said in the intro and reiterate that this is a way for you to validate that you are using the correct declination of a noun. Those are the 4 steps you need to consider when you choose the right form for the noun, and practicing those over and over and over and over and over again will definitely help you improve your accuracy. I hope I pronounced that word right. Thank you so much for watching this. Check the Romanian Academy on Patreon and Discord. And until the next time, la revedere!